Lesson 5-4, Subtract Integers. And by the end of today's lesson, you will be able to subtract integers. Make sure that you pause the video as we go along today to take notes and rewatch any parts that you need to. Catherine wants to know how to complete this subtraction. 4 minus 5 equals n. So to study the relationship between adding and subtracting integers, she made the table right here. So she has x equaling different variables here, and then here she has the equations. Here's when they're adding, here's when they're subtracting. So she plugged x into each of these equations. 7 plus negative 5 equals 2, but 7 minus 5 equals 2. 6 plus negative 5 equals 1. 6 minus 5 equals 1. 5 plus negative 5 equals 0, and 5 minus 5 equals 0. 4 plus negative 5 equals negative 1. So by looking at this, she realized that the pattern would be that 4 minus 5 would equal negative 1. When you subtract an integer, it's the same as adding the opposite of that integer. So we have a minus b equals a plus negative b for these integers a and b. These equal the same thing. So you can plug in any number for a and b, and this would be true. A minus b equals a plus negative b. To subtract integers, first add the opposite of the subtrahend. Second, rewrite as an addition sentence. And third, then you use the rules for adding integers. So in our first example, 4 minus 5 equals n, we would first find the opposite of the subtrahend. So that's the number that we're subtracting. So that would be 4 plus negative 5, because that's the opposite, equals n. So I've already rewritten it as an addition sentence. Now all that's left is to add. So positive 4 plus negative 5, 4 plus negative 5 equals negative 1. Let's try another example of negative 6 minus negative 8 equals n. So we're going to keep our negative 6. Then the opposite of negative 8 is positive 8, and we're turning it into an addition sentence. So 6 plus positive 8 equals n. So now we have negative 6 plus the positive 8 equals positive 2. So taking a look at this example, I'm going to show you another way that you can do this. So just like in the previous lesson, I showed you that I would draw a line down here because we want to get that n by itself. So in order to get the n by itself, we need to get rid of the 7. So I'm going to do the opposite of them, minus 7 on both sides. So I'm left with negative n equals, and then minus 7, that's 10. So negative n equals 10. If there's no number in front of that letter, there's just a 1 there. So if I think of it as negative 1n, and I need to get rid of that negative and the 1, they're multiplying, so I would divide by negative 1. That gets rid of it, and now my n is by itself. So now I need to divide this by negative 1. So 10 divided by negative 1 equals negative 10. So my answer here is negative 10. Okay, let's try one more like that because it's a little different, but I think that this method is how you're going to continue using as you move forward through high school, so I think it's good for you to see it now. So I draw my line down here so that way I remember what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I need to get the r by itself. So I do the opposite, minus 6. So I'm left with here is negative r equals. So I subtract 6 off this side. 12 minus 6 equals 6. Negative r equals 6. Remember, I need to get rid of that negative because I want that r completely by itself. So I divide that by negative 1 and divide this by negative 1. Now I have r equals negative 6. So let's take a look at the next example. I have negative 9 minus positive 6 equals n. So when I use the other strategy, I have negative 9, and I'm going to add the opposite of that. So plus negative 6 equals n. So if I have both like signs that I'm adding together, my answer is going to be negative, and I just add those two together. So I have negative 9 plus negative 6. They have the same sign, and I'm adding them together so they stay negative, negative 15. Okay, one last example is negative 5 minus 0 equals n. Remember, 0 is its own opposite. So I have negative 5 plus the opposite 0, it's just 0, equals negative 5. Okay, so that's it for today's lesson. Make sure that you re-watch any parts that you may get stuck on as you start working on today's lesson, and review your notes, and have fun with math today.